Swedish cartoons. That's right, today I'm going to talk about some cartoons from my home country. Now, the animation industry has never been big in Sweden, and very often when we have done cartoons, it's often collaborations with other countries. Very often France or Canada. Or French Canada. But there's also some cartoons that I think are entirely produced here. And I think that you will see a diversity in the budget when it comes to the animation. I won't include cartoons that are based on Swedish stories but animated somewhere else. For example, the animated Pippi Longstocking series. Well, Pippi Longstocking is a Swedish story, but it was animated entirely in Canada, so I won't include it here today. I will also not include some cartoons that are movies, for example the Peter No-Tail movies. They are very iconic, but they are movies and not TV shows. I think that we should get right into the cartoons. The first one I want to talk about is Bamse. This cartoon started off as a comic book, and the comic books is what most of us know about Bamse from, because they are still making new comics even today. And the comics often have a mix of grand adventures when they visit dragons or witches or when they go back in time, but they also have a lot of quote-unquote normal stuff about Bamse's kids in school and how it feels to be bullied and what you should do if someone is not allowed to play with the others and how different kids have different circumstances at home. One of Bamse's kids is neurodivergent and it was not that common to present that back in the 80s. And the comics are also extremely anti-capitalist. And also like a bit too preachy at times about how you shouldn't eat candy. So much stuff about candy is bad for your teeth, and if you really should eat candy then only eat it once a week, preferably on Saturdays, because that's the weekend. Honestly, like Nordic kids media in general are very much like don't eat too much candy. I mean, for example, Lazy Town, that's from Iceland, another Nordic country. They also are a lot preachy with like don't eat candy. And if you really want to eat candy, then eat it only once a week. Let me tell you, that quote-unquote rule, it maybe worked on us when we were kids, because like as kids I remembered if I saw someone eat candy when it wasn't Saturday, I called them out on it. But the second we turned into teenagers and like got to go shopping on our own, we realized, hey, we can just buy candy in the middle of the week if we want to. And then we got cavities, but you know, anyway. But the cartoon of Bamse, well, in the 2010s they made like full-length movies that are really well animated. I think the animators were from Hong Kong, so that can explain why the animation is much smoother. However, there was also a cartoon from the 70s, and it looked like this. Okay, but what's the plot about Bamse? Bamse is a bear that when he drinks a special kind of honey that his grandma has made, he turns into the world's strongest bear. However, he does not like fighting. Fighting is very wrong. He's not only the world's strongest bear, he's also the world's nicest bear. And he uses his strength to help the community. I always thought that the comics had way more action. The cartoon is like, well, the cartoon can be exciting too, because they have adventures like finding an underwater treasure, going on a flying carpet, and having a witch curse the entire village. But most of all, it is known for its completely ridiculous sound effects. And also hands down the funniest animation in Swedish history. All in all, it's a very well-beloved cartoon, but most of us like the comics even more, even though the cartoon is great as well. Next, I want to talk about this guy named Kalle that has a climbing tree. Apparently in English they changed his name to Charlie, which I think tracks, because when we translated Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, we changed his name to Kalle, so I feel like every time someone is named Kalle, you change it to Charlie, and every time someone is named Charlie, you change it to Kalle in Swedish. Which, by the way, briefly, I won't mention the Swedish miniseries of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, mostly because it's not much of a cartoon, it's just like, you know, painted pictures that are zoomed in and out. It's just a guy reading from the book, and then they have illustrated everything, which I think is a very ambitious project, and I also would like to illustrate a book sometime. And in a funny way, it's the closest adaptation to the book that we have, because he literally reads directly from the book, and also they have both parents following the kids to the factory, because that's what they do in the book, and then in the movies they only have one parent that follows them, because, you know, it would be too crowded otherwise. I do, however, appreciate that they gave Mr. Salt a Skåne accent for some reason.
Sen förstår ni så lastade jag dem på en av mina bilar och de skickades sen till min fabrik. Ja, i jordnötsbranschen. Det är en härlig bransch, förstår ni. Och jag har hundratals sådana här kvinnor. Ja, ni är anställda hos mig. De plockar av skalen då innan rostning och saltning.
That was a sidetrack. Back to Kalle and his climbing tree. It's a very slice of life show. It's just Kalle that sits in this climbing tree and fantasizes about different things or recalls old memories. My favorite one being when he started school. All the characters just speak gibberish, so when the teacher calls everyone's names, it just sounds like this. I don't have too much to say about the series besides that the theme song slaps, and that the same creator also made 2 other shows. They made one called in English The Man That Didn't Want to Grow Up, which is about a man that thinks about his childhood and how he misses being a child. And one called Mr. Flykt, that is about a school teacher that has a bunch of distracted students that always start fantasizing about something completely else. And it's a running gag that is a girl that always gets late to every class, and she always has the most ridiculous reasons to why. Next, we have Alfons Åberg, that in English is called Alfie Atkins, but I'm gonna call him Alfons because I'm Swedish. He's a little boy that lives with his dad somewhere in a city somewhere. And most episodes just follow everyday adventures that he has with his dad or with his friends. One episode is about him not wanting to go to sleep and his dad trying everything to make him go to sleep. One episode is about his birthday party and what happens on his birthday party. One episode is about him being nervous to start school and finding out that actually everyone else is also nervous to start school, and also his teacher was the most nervous to start school. One episode is about him punching a kid and having a guilt trip several nights in a row about this. A monster starts appearing under his bed, symbolizing his guilt that grows and grows every day. It's very slice of life and very relatable, both if you're a kid or if you are an adult and gets reminded of your own childhood. And even if the cartoon came out in the 70s, I think it's still quite a classic even today. Many children at preschool still watches this cartoon or read the books that it's based on. Alphonse is one of those characters that just has been printed into our minds and is a very beloved children's series. Next up, I want to talk about an old man and his cat. It's time to talk about Petson and Findus. Now, Petson and Findus started out as a children's book series, and then it became a cartoon with a very catchy intro. It follows the old man Petson and his cat Findus that always gets into mischief. It's very often that Petson just is a grumpy old man and Findus just is like his child that makes his days a little more engaging. Petson also has a neighbor that thinks that he's insane because he only talks to his cat, but hey, his cat is walking on 2 legs. And also can speak, so it's hard not to like Petson and Findus. Because it's just so wholesome. Findus really is like a little kid, and Petson just wants to do everything for him. If Findus wants to go fishing, then they go fishing. If Findus wants to be Lucia, then Petson makes him a Lucia outfit. If Findus wants to see Santa Claus, then Petson built a Santa machine in his shed. Petson and Findus is just like the perfect thing to watch when you just want to cozy up and watch something easy where there's not much at stakes, just good vibes with a man and his cat. And now I want to talk about a show that is quite provocative in some ways. The Three Friends and Jerry. The Three Friends and Jerry follows Jerry trying to be friends with these 3 other boys that just always mess with him and never are that nice to him at all, but he keeps wanting to hang out with them, so they are more or less stuck with him. They often get into mischief together and it often goes very, very wrong. A lot of people have called this show Sweden's response to South Park, and I kinda get it, honestly. Although I also think that it wasn't really that we got inspired by South Park, I think they just coincidentally came around the same time. But this cartoon is really good at showing what would be okay to show on TV in some countries and what would probably make people scream if it was airing in another country. I don't know what they did in the English dub of this show, because I know there's an English dub, but in Swedish, the characters swear. Quite a bit, actually. And honestly, in Swedish kid shows in general, characters just swear sometimes, and it's nothing that odd about it. Also, if you recognize this type of animation, it's because the same guy also produced some other kid shows and also not so kid-friendly shows, like Lisa and Robin. I have never seen Robin, but apparently it was a show that a lot of like Americans that watched MTV in the 90s know about. All I've seen from Robin is this really weird music video, but knowing Magnus Carlsson, that checks out. Also, one of the 3 friends named Frank, he's in love with his cousin Linda, and yeah, that's just a thing that happens. And I'm not sure how to feel about it. But I'd also seen several kids shows where they are in love with their cousins. Many who aren't from Sweden, so I don't know, maybe it's a thing sometimes. 2 other things I want to mention about this show. 1, Jerry's dad is fucking terrifying, but he also has a lot of iconic lines. The other thing I want to comment about is that I think it's a pretty accurate representation of what a Swedish small town looks like. Because all the shenanigans that are going on in this town, the boys getting into crazy mischief, events that just go completely bonkers, it sounds like someone's dad recalling his childhood memories with his pals. And he tells them with a straight face, and you are like kind of concerned because it feels like this should be more traumatic than what he makes it seem like it is. I feel like Jerry's gonna grow up thinking that these boys are his best friends when time after time again they fucking explicitly tell him to his face that they don't like him and they don't want to play with him. But you know, he wants to hang out with them, so they just have to deal with him. Next cartoon I want to talk about is Sune. Or if you have seen the show in other languages, his name is probably Tosh. because they changed his name to Tosh in English and also in Spanish, I think. Which I get why they did, because I don't think anyone that is not Swedish can pronounce the name Sune correctly. But I'm gonna call him Sune because this show is based on a Swedish book series that have way too many books about this kid named Sune. His main interest is girls, and he always gets a new crush. The thing is, he never really wants to settle down with a girl, he just wants to woo every one of them, and then when he has wooed them, he moves on to the next person. The book series are completely insane, and I think that and a lot of us read those books when we were young and we don't really remember what happened in them, but if we reread them as adults, we realize just how insane those books are. They get kind of dirty too, like I remember explicitly a scene in a book where Sune somehow gets his zipper stuck in a tent and both his pants and his underwear falls down, and his female friend / girlfriend, because he has an on and off relationship with her, starts laughing, and he looks down at his genitals and, to not make it awkward, starts laughing himself and swing his thing around and going, "This is my worm named Kurt." And even 8-year-old me was like, what did I just read? But every adaptation of Sune and his family seems to like mellow down the dirty parts, and the cartoon is my favorite adaptation, I would say. Most episodes is about Sune getting a crush on a new girl and finding a way to impress her in some way. He falls in love with a swimmer, he decides to dig a pool in his garden for her. If he falls in love with a scout, he tries to be a scout. If he falls in love with a goth girl, he tries to pretend that he likes spiders to impress her. And if he falls in love with a girl from Italy, he changes the GPS so that the class goes there on their field trip instead of wherever they were going. He's just so stupid. But he always tries his best, and you do root for him even though his ideas are terrible and you know they will fail miserably. His family is quite iconic too. He has a younger brother and an older sister and 2 parents who both are completely insane, but his mom is less insane than his dad. And the whole family is quite beloved in the Swedish culture, mostly in live-action adaptations of these books. But I think that they are quite okay in the cartoon as well, even though they aren't as over the top as they can be in some live-action adaptations. All in all, it's a pretty fun show, I think. And now we have arrived to the last one, which is Creep School. I love Creep School so much. A fun fact about Creep School is that it's one of those shows that I mentioned earlier, that it's a collaboration between Sweden, France and Canada, which both means that the budget is a lot higher, but also is the reason why we have an English theme song. However, in Canada and also in like basically every other country, they have a instrumental as the theme song. Whereas we in Sweden got a theme song where they sing in English. Voices calling, welcome to Creep School. What's going on in such a freaky place? And that makes me sad because the theme song where they sing is such a bop. Okay, what's the plot? The plot is that 4 human children are going to a boarding school. And when they arrive there, they discover that this school is for monsters and it's kind of creepy. And every episode is about one of these 4 children discovering something that either unleashes a creature or makes them go insane or has them traveling back in time. Or they eat a fruit and they regress or progress in age. Which, by the way, I feel like it was a theme around the 90s and 2000s that every cartoon and sometimes live action too had a turn into a baby episode, where one or several characters got turned into a baby for the episode and the other characters have to take care of them while trying to find a cure to make them go back to normal. Why was that a trend? Anyway, some of these episodes are, just like the show tells you, quite creepy. We have one where the character named Emma, who for some reason is named Janice in the English dub of Creep School, which I don't understand why, because Emma is a pretty common name in English-speaking countries too, so I don't know why you change it to Janice, but anyway. Emma finds a magic mirror and gets trapped inside that mirror, and the only way to get her out is to find 13 pieces that have all escaped throughout the school. There's also an episode that really stood out to me, but I don't remember the exact plot of it. I just remember that the character Elliot somehow made everyone else at the school disappear, and if he wanted everyone back, he had to give up one of his greatest desires. And then the whole episode ended with everyone being naked and hiding behind different furniture, asking Elliot if he please could go retrieve some clothes for them. I remember I always reacted to this character Elsa having like fairy wings because I never really saw her wings under her normal clothes, so when she was naked I was like, oh my god, she has wings. I think it's a perfect show if you like some thrill, and the stakes can be quite high sometimes. And it really can creep you out, but not enough that you feel like too scared to watch. Like you want to continue watching just to see what happens, but for a young kid you get the chills watching it. All episodes are up on English on YouTube, so please check it out if you want to. And that was all the cartoons I wanted to bring up today. There are of course some other cartoons I could have talked about, but these ones were the ones that I thought of right now. Have you seen any of these Swedish cartoons? I mean, if you're Swedish, I hope you have, but if you aren't Swedish, it would be fun to see if some of these cartoons aired in your country or something. Thanks for watching, leave a comment because comments are fun, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!